Hello and welcome to Hiring for Good podcast. Today's guest is Tom Burns, a visionary entrepreneur best known as the co-founder of Yogi Tea and former CEO of Golden Temple. Over the past several decades, Tom has built and led a range of successful, values-driven businesses in the natural foods and wellness industries. He helped grow Yogi Tea into an internationally recognized brand rooted in Ayurvedic tradition, organic ingredients, and social responsibility. As CEO of Golden Temple, he played a key role in transforming a spiritually inspired collective into a thriving natural products company. Throughout his career, Tom has championed conscious leadership, purpose-driven hiring, and building organizations that nourish both people and planet. And in addition to all of that, he has many more stories to share with us, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But Tom, thank you so much for being here today on Hiring for Good.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Whenever I need a bio, I'll actually ask you to write it for me.
I'll send that one your way. No problem. Well, Suzanne, I'm so sorry, Suzanne. I didn't say
that's okay.
As usual. My wonderful co-host, Suzanne Hanifin, and I with Acumen Executive Search are having this conversation about leadership and lessons learned and what our audience can really take away from some of your incredible experiences, Tom. So we always begin by asking our guests to just kind of fill in the blanks on that kind of brief little snapshot I gave into your story. Your story is so interesting and multifaceted that I wonder how long, so I would say let's just go for it and we can play around with the story. I think your story is so interesting. I'm less concerned about getting to everything, but where do you want to start?
Sure, maybe from the very beginning.
Yeah.
So, I grew up in a manufacturing family. So my great-grandfather had a shipbuilding company with his brothers in Seattle. My grandfather had an anchor chain business, was both in Bellingham, and then he opened one with his partners in Portland in the early 1920s. Some people may or may not know, I think Portland built 700 ships for World War II. So every ship needs anchor chain. But it was going too slow. The old process for anchor chain was so slow that the Navy had to start cutting the lengths of anchor chain, which, of course, they didn't want to do. But in early 1940s, my grandfather and his partner invented a whole new process for anchor chain and had it patented in 1941, which changed the whole situation so they could go back to putting the right length of anchor chains on there. So anyway, that's what I grew up in. So I'm kind of like the fourth generation. And I had my grandfather would speak to me about engineering concepts when I was 6 years old. And he'd go on, and then he'd look at me and go, "Savvy?" And I'd nod my head.
Wow.
And he'd go on and on.
Yeah.
And he'd go, "Savvy?" And I'd nod my head. And he would finish up, and I went to my dad, and I go, "What's savvy mean?" But I knew to nod my head, right? And then from the anchor chain, we got into conveyor chain, which goes because the timber industry in the Northwest and all the sawmills need conveyor chain for the logs. So my father in the summer would take me around when I was 4 or 5 years old into sawmills, right into the sawmills where the huge saws and the logs. I'm standing right there, of course. Probably before the days of OSHA.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Get in there. Yeah. And then I was really kind of, from my grandfather being, groomed to be the person that came and took over the family business. But my dad and uncle were not engineers, so I was to be the engineer. So I ended up going to Oregon State because they had both metallurgical engineering and foundry technology. And but then it was the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, and the whole cultural change came on, and I decided that there was a different way to live, and I was going to make my own decisions. So ended up coming out of that, getting into yoga and meditation, and went to live in an ashram in Eugene, and, we go, we actually have to support ourselves. But we wanted to do something that reflected, our values at the time, so we got into doing into natural food. And one of our friends, he had an insurance policy. He cashed for $2,000, and that was the beginning of developing a couple companies that became a couple $100 million in revenue. Wow. And we never took any other investors, And you could do it in that day. It's very difficult to do now. But we started out baking breads in the back of the health food and pool store, which was part of the Springfield Creamery when it was in Springfield with the Keeseys. So we grew up with all of, the old hippie history of Eugene and Springfield.
That's awesome. Yeah. So before you go on, I have to ask, what happened to your family business? Did it survive?
Oh, no, it didn't. So it was interesting because, I would have graduated in 1973, and then the recession, 73, 74, they finally closed the business in 1975. So I'm kind of going, gee, what would I have felt? Hey, thanks, Dad.
Exactly.
Here I am, do all this, and now. But I had already made that decision.
Right.
So, that was fine. And my dad went on, and my uncle, to be manufacturers representatives, and they did well. But, we always missed, he loved manufacturing, so it's kind of in our blood.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing ever since.
And it's funny how these decisions really do shape and change our trajectory, if I can speak this morning. And so looking back on formative experiences that shaped who you are today, kind of as you're going through, talk about some of those.
I think my grandfather just, sitting down when I was that young, and he'd give me gifts for Christmas or whatever, which were like mechanical things that could cut off your fingers and stuff. Right. And I'd have it for, half a day, and then my parents would store it way up in the attic where I couldn't even get at it because of that. But, I was just inspired by that. I love being in manufacturing plants. I loved going with my dad to sawmills and just hanging out. So I think that just became part of a really something that just stuck with me all the way through.
Sure.
Well, and I look at like manufacturing, and I'm sorry, Tanis, to jump in on this, as kind of almost the exact opposite as a yogi and being on, like one is very structured and processed, and
right.
The other is more free and organic, at least in my perspective.
I guess, I would bring it up maybe later, but it kind of fits in because through, we got into yoga and meditation. That was kind of the beginning, but our teacher was also a Sikh, and so he wore a turban and a long beard, and so we just started following that. So he didn't go like everybody should be Sikhs, but it just started to happen. But, Sikhs tenet is believe in one God, earn by the sweat of your brow, and share with others. So it just really became, how can I serve? And the best way I could serve was actually building the business and doing that. But the meditative and yoga practice helped to, keep you focused and just kind of operating at your high level. So I kind of actually look at it the other way, is that, and the Sikh's life was that of a householder, not going away in a cave and sitting and meditating, but being in the midst of everything going on, but still being calm and focused.
Yeah.
And so that's really how it came together for me. It was a way, that it meant a couple things, because in high school, I went to Jesuit high school here, and we were starting growing our hair long after the Beatles and all of that, but that's not okay, so I remember being dragged down to the principal's office, and they're cutting my hair.
Oh, my gosh.
And I go, there must be a religion where you don't cut your hair. Yeah. I knew nothing about Sikhs then. I was like 14 years old.
Right.
But it just kind of came to be. So I look at it from both sides. That, it was a whole way of living and developing yourself in a kind of the sense of reaching some sense of peace and calm, and as we used to call it, nirvana or samadhi or all of that stuff. But at the same time, there was, the structured work, but, it's like both sides.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I will out myself on this podcast as certainly not at that level, but I have practiced yoga for decades, and I've been an instructor for over 10 years. And I actually find yoga to be quite structured. I could see how I could see how it could lend itself to operational success, because it's sort of like a foundational strength in your body and in your connection to your place in the world. I think that like fosters a certain physical confidence and just strength, and mental clarity, and like if you're doing it. I don't pretend, but I could see how it would add a really interesting dimension to business leadership, which is what this podcast is about. So, I feel I don't want to skip too much because your story extends longer, but one of the questions that we always ask our guests is, how do you operationalize your personal values? And I mean, like, honestly, you already alluded to it a little bit, but here you have these really strong beliefs. How did you manage to integrate those into the professional work that you did, or into the organizational, the operational?
I think kind of the thing that I said, even in high school, started thinking about, there must be other ways, other paths to follow, and then getting to the yoga and meditation and having a teacher that happened to be Sikh, so we got into the Sikh side of it. And then, as I said, the operative of Sikhs is share with others. But if you don't have anything, what can you share, right? In a material way, right? So businesses made sense. Also, the yoga we practiced was Kundalini yoga, which was very active. Yeah. And the Sikh path is, they're called saint soldiers or saint warriors, and that's their history. And so that's a very kind of out there situation, not sitting in a cave, way away from everything. But for me, it was, how do I contribute? How do I give? How do I share? That's been the driving force, whether it's business or creating some perpetual legacy and whatever. But, it's like, if you don't have anything in your backpack, what are you going to share? Right. So it was, and the same thing when we got to conscious businesses. They talk about the three-legged stool: economics, social, and environmental. But without the economics, then the stool falls over. Right. It needs that leg. So it's like, it's not bad. Sometimes it's not like, oh, I have to separate myself from anything like business or anything that's practical. It's like how you do it, and so you can do it in a conscious way. And
well, how did you do it? Yeah, how did you do it? We knew we had to develop businesses to support ourselves, and then for me, then it just kind of tapped into what I'd been raised as, and not even understanding it at the time, because I kind of in college decided I'm doing something different. But what was more impactful was like my grandfather and growing up in this business, and then getting into the yoga, and then understanding, here's a conscious way that I can actually do what I can do well.
Yeah, and it's the intentionality. Right.
Yeah, no, it's it's focused. That's what yoga is about. Is like projection. So I want to be here. So I have partners who are always going, now, okay, we know, but I'm going, look, with the new business, if we do things right, the next 2 or 3 years we can be anywhere from 300 to 500 million a year. So how do we get to this? But I think both are necessary. Yes, you have to have the practical steps, but without the vision out there, what are you doing? So that's what our teacher would say to me, or when I'm around people, he would say, if you want anything to grow. At the time, I went by the name Kartar, which was a Sikh name that our teacher gave me. And so he said, if you want something to grow, give it to Kartar. If you want something to shrink, give it to Siddhi Kadam. But that's just me. I get into it. Yeah. I remember walking in because I was in, with Cameron, I was in Salem, and we had the distribution business, and the bakery was in Eugene, and then we split this. I went back to Eugene, and so I was in, and they were making these honey nut candy bars that were, so the first day I'm going, okay, we made this many cases. So tomorrow we're going to make this many more or whatever.
Yeah.
But nobody told me that. That was
Right.
just somehow ingrained in me. And how do you make it bigger?
So
That's driving me all the time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't stop because
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, to hear and then stop. It's more the process of maximizing and reaching your potential. So that's, you know, I know you're talking about hiring for good. That's where, it gets me is providing, well, for me, back in all the yoga stuff and all of that, numerology, and if you've heard of numerology, but if you look at my destiny is a 7, which is platform of levitation, which means in my mind, my interpretation is my job is to build something so that others have a platform of which they can grow from. So when I think about hiring or whatever, for me, it's like finding people that are much smarter than I am and giving them what they need so they can reach their potential.
I love that. And so from Yogi, from the bakery,
right,
distribution, Yogi, I mean, Yogi's global.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, so we had two. We literally had my friends in L.A. Literally, it was in a garage.
Oh, geez.
In L.A., it was in one of these garages in where the area where the L.A. ashram and all the people lived on Pruce Road. And then we had already built a manufacturing plant in the mid-'80s. We expanded and got into a decent plant. And so we then brought Yogi Tea to Eugene for all the production and all the manufacturing.
which is amazing.
And then there was
today.
another group in Germany, in Hamburg, doing Yogi Tea there. And they had one little package of it. Because this started, we had Golden Temple Conscious Cookeries, these restaurants all over. There was one in L.A., one in Cambridge and Boston, and in different places in Santa Fe. And so, our teacher had given us this recipe, called it Yogi Tea, which is like chai, basically. So that's kind of the beginning of it, because they had it in the restaurants all the time. And then you went into any one of our, Sikh family, yoga family, they're always making Yogi Tea on the stove. So that's really was the beginning of it. And then we made it into a packaged product, and then we started. Yogi Bhajan sent me. He said, "Go to Europe and get this thing together," because they were, doing things, but it wasn't kind of, Again, if he knows if he wants it to grow, just send him over there, because he's not going to go, "Oh, that's cool." No, it's not cool. It should be like this much, not this much.
Yeah. So I love this. So your family background kind of shaped you to be this, and kind of innately who you are, this agent of growth. Right. And sounds like a very wise operational leader as well. So visionary expansion, but you can also figure out ways to operationalize that vision. And then you end up, getting involved with the yoga family, and then taking just something people wanted and extending the brand. But you, it's kind of interesting that a kid that just wanted to have long hair and be an engineering student in college, ended up making this global brand. So you were just built that way, and then
I think I was part of the whole process, because one of the things later on, when we were centered in Eugene for the U.S. side, and at the time it was like 2007 or 8. And we really needed to hire a trained marketing person. And we had several really good interviews, but they didn't want to live in Eugene. So I go, we're not losing the next person. So we said, if we hire him, we told him, we'll open an office in Portland. Which we did. And so my point is that, so he was very well trained, went to, it's forget where he got his MBA, but he was with Johnson & Johnson, so he was very well trained and whatever, and very well experienced and broad experience. But he used to tell me, he says, the greatest asset you guys have is your senior team, because we'd been together for decades.
Right.
But the bigger thing is that we had this common commitment at the very high level. And so that's another thing that I would bring to hiring, is that I think establishing the vision, but I think I was telling you yesterday, we got to the place where, okay, Sikhs earn and they share. And so sharing is the main point. And so we started building our annual plans on how much are we going to give back to the community in dollar amounts.
Yeah.
If we're going to do that, how much revenue, how much profit, all of that. And then we take it all the way down through the floor level people. So they all feel part of that. But they feel part of this bigger thing in the community that are doing good things in the community.
Yeah.
And we used to measure, we had our human resource department, we would measure morale in not an exam, but
survey.
A survey, right? Thank you. And twice a year. And when we started doing planning based off of what are we going to give, it had increased morale substantially.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. 2008, when the financial crisis hit, but we were already in. We had developed a cereal product that we put into Food for Lane County and the Oregon food banks that went into school breakfast programs for kids to make sure that they had a decent breakfast every day. And from there, I think it was, going into 2009, we did a program where we challenged people to give to Food for Lane County. So in the midst of the financial crisis, it increased, not us, but part of it increased donations by 25% when you would think they'd probably go the other way.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, and I think you said it beautifully. It's about everybody coming together with, again, this whole, it's bigger than yourself. It's about the community.
Yeah, it's not me. I don't want to make this about me just doing this. I just happen to be part of this, and you end up, sometimes you end up in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right things.
But it's also a testament to having a shared vision and a commitment to that vision collectively. And I think, some of that starts with a leader at the top that can get everybody kind of on board, whether that was you or your teacher, like everybody shares this vision, and through working together, amazing things can be accomplished. It's kind of an unlikely success story, but it was incredibly successful. And then you went on. I mean, you didn't have time to. I know you've sat on multiple boards. You've started and invested in other businesses, started other businesses, running. The CEO of another large company now. Through all of those endeavors and experiences, where, have you retained kind of the essence of who you are throughout, or have the experiences shaped and continually reshaped and reformed who you are?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I recall my mother, we would go up into the San Juan Islands where my family had land, and all the cousins would be together and whatever. And but they had this huge, area and this huge grass, but they had this sit-down lawnmower. So I would spend, all day long for a couple of days doing that while everybody's down on the beach. And my mother would laugh, "Oh, so all you want to do is work." I go, "Yep."
Yeah.
So through the yoga and meditation, and then into just from my background plus into the Sikh side of it, for me, really work is worship. That's how I worship, is, through work.
I love that.
And it's doing it together with others of like mind. So I think really maybe what I learned out of it is, and what underpins all of this is just values, value-based. And how do you paint that picture out there and it just keeps getting bigger.
Yeah.
So it never, there's, it's the journey, right? It's a cliche, but it is the journey. That's what I want to keep going. That's why I'm still here doing this, because, I can laugh and say, like I said to the kids when we finished with Yogi Tea, and they go, now what? And I go, how about nothing? And they go, no, that's not working for us. And but I would have done it anyway.
Yeah.
It wasn't working for me either.
No, I don't think you're the type of guy to just sit around.
No, but you mentioned that part of Yogi's success was that you had this longevity, closeness with the leadership team.
Right, yes.
But you still, as you grew, had to keep hiring and bringing it together. And you're talking about our love language, that it's should be value-based hiring, not skill set base. But what are some of the learnings from that, of either something that worked beautifully or failed?
Well, along the way, so the head of the ashram in Eugene, which was a great guy, but he was a PhD and taught. But then we got into this and we got into business. So, but he was always like, okay, here's all these, business gurus and all this stuff and whatever. So I got into, we had a subscription to the Harvard Business Review. Mm-hmm. And so I'd read these articles and one I remember, it's years and years ago, but it was about hiring. And they had done a study, and they came up that the average employee in the U.S. was 30% effective. They get blown out on the weekend, nothing happens on Monday. About halfway through Tuesday, everybody gets in gear, and they go through halfway Thursday, and then they start thinking about the weekend.
Yeah.
Right? So the point was about hiring A players. Mm-hmm. And not B or C, or hiring somebody that you can bring them up to the A level.
Yeah.
So then I go back to, tangent on this and this came from our teacher, used to be on the door to our office in the Yogi Tea office in Portland, but it's on a tea tag, was feel good, be good, do good. And the pathway is feel good. You want to be with people you want to be with. You want to be working in an environment that you want to be with. You want to feel good about what you're making, how you're making it, and all of that, which then we looked as the foundation, the platform to be the best that you can be. We know that that's, for Marines or whatever it is, right? But operating at your highest potential. And then that gives us the greatest amount of power to do good, and do good is really the point. And so when we're hiring people, we'd explain that, but we're looking for somebody that's inspired by those values, also understands what it is to work for an entrepreneurial company, because change is everything.
Constant.
And being, nimble, and when things change, you change. So if you don't like that, it's okay, but we'll bring people in if, they kind of have to self-select in a sense. But it's no big deal. If you don't, that's fine. We'll just help you find something else. But and my philosophy was, look, I'm pretty consensus-oriented, and you'll talk about CEOs making all these decisions and whatever, and sometimes that has to happen. But my real operative is we all want to be in the same boat. I don't want 8 people and they get outvoted 6-2. Now we have 2 people in the boat that are either not rowing in the same direction, or just sticking their oar in the water and slowing it down. So we would work all the time to come together to where we can all agree, and we're all in the same boat, rowing at the same cadence in the same direction to get to our goals.
Wow.
And that's what really inspired me. And it takes a little bit more time, but it was more getting, all the team really focused on the same projected goal. And how do we get there?
Well, and you mentioned that Yogi kind of ran its course, like,
For me, there's a long story to that. And I won't even get into that because,
we don't
things
have time.
happen. And then you go, and it's like I tell my, son who was in our new investment, which we invested in the middle of 2014 with our partner JD, who was from India, that we got VC investments, and I came from, we did it all our own. I'm not really wanting to do this. I think the money I put in, I was supposed to put in this much money, and I put in and it just kept going, and I'm all in, which I took everything, sold it, and put it in here. So I'm basically all in. But that door, and then I finally was able to separate out the manufacturing and private label business separate from the VC investors who own the majority of the company at this point. Left Ajit there to run our ownership there, but then they dumped him. But I said, look, it's difficult, but,
Yeah.
it's like you need, you can know, I don't want to say you have to know this, but when one door closes, there's another one that's opening. It's just a matter of looking for that, so.
Absolutely.
It's so great. I feel like you might be the first guest we've ever had where you kind of preemptively answered our questions before we even asked them. I was like, wow, he's already talked about that. So, I mean, I think the only things that I don't know that you've said yet for the, kind of the different touch points we really want to make sure that we cover over the course of these conversations are, if you were to look back and, encounter yourself as a young man of 20 or
a Jesuit or with you.
And if you now were to meet that guy, what advice would you give him?
It's interesting because what crosses my mind is probably nothing, because I think what happened was to happen for me. That's how I look at it. And, it was probably my junior year in college. It was a tough time. Something that I had just disappeared. And I won't go into the details of that, but there was a year where it was very tough, but it kind of ended up, getting reconnected because I was on this kind of yogic meditative path, and then thought, oh no, I don't need to do this anymore. And something in the universe says, oh yes, you do. Okay. So if you don't hear it, well, I'll give you a big slap. Yeah. And, if you, now I read the I Ching a lot and so it talks about was thunder over thunder, and it says, the universe will, if you don't get it, it's going to keep, accelerating it until you do. Yeah. And so I don't know that I would change anything, because I just look at the pathway was, what did I need as a being in order to develop, myself to, a potential that's there, but that's still going on. Yeah. So it's not like that's over with. It's never over with.
Well, I love this answer, but then let me change it. Let me change the question. Ahead. Okay. So let me ask you then, what would you tell just a random 20-year-old if they came to you and said, what advice would you give me? It's like, follow the direction of the universe, trust yourself, what would your advice be to someone young?
I think we were talking a bit yesterday, and what I would say, what I've come to, and when I had a chance to speak in front of people, I would say, I don't care what you do and how you do it, but I think that you have to come up with a routine for yourself, you figure it out, that brings you to your 0 point every day. That you're not dragging in the past, so you're not dragging that into the future. And then it just comes to you. Yeah. So I can't, just tell somebody, oh, you should do this. Yeah. I'm not like that, though I might, intimate it to my son, and that, another door is opening. Yeah, you can worry about the past, which you can't change. Or you can, work on yourself and project that it'll just come. And exactly what it is, who knows? So.
Well, and before I ask this last question, really, I want to hear what you're doing today, because you are a CEO of a new, I guess not that new. It's been around for a little while.
Well, we split it off from Delicious, which was the branded company, in the beginning of 2022. So it's been about 3 years.
Yeah.
And we called it Plant-Based Innovations because we got, when we first invested with Delicious. We were making the Indian product Mango Lassi in retail, and then which was a dairy product. And then we started making almond milk yogurt and kind of got into the whole plant-based trend, which has kind of had some headwinds now. And for us, we're focused on manufacturing. So for us, it's volume,
Right.
and we're out of the brand side of it. We're the preferred supplier for people's own store brands. So I say now we just call it PBI because plant-based is not only what we do. I said we could call it protein-based innovation.
Yeah.
But the innovation part is that we want to be kind of your turnkey. We want to get in and help at all aspects in your business because the more we can help that helps you grow, the better it is for us.
Right.
And so, we're into manufacturing now. We want to play, in the big arena. So having plants on the East Coast, the Midwest, and the West Coast is an important strategic part for us. So we're always looking for new plants. Now, to build new plants from the ground up, that's very expensive. And, big companies have that money, but we just look for opportunities where we can see that we can buy the plant for what we can afford and then turn it into something over time that will provide the kind of foundation that we can go after and serve the big store brands of the world.
I love it. So our last question, though, I always ask, this is the podcast of Hiring for Good, but what does hiring for good mean to you?
Well, I guess, a few things, hiring for good and then means for like forever, right? So you're thinking about, this person will be with us, long term. That's kind of what I've always, got into things like with the cereal company and the tea company. That was from 72 until 2012, however many, what is that, 40 years, something like that. I would have been with my family's business, so it's always been long-term. So hiring for good, not that we just need this person for today or for 6 months or a year until we get this thing done, but it's somebody we want to hang out with, we want to develop ourselves with. And I see that part of hiring for good. Hiring people that are committed and that are inspired by, our ultimate goal is what we share with our communities. And it makes me think of what we used to talk about from yoga, the energy centers. And so when a business starts, it's on the first energy center chakra. But that's survival. It's just staying in business. Whatever I have to do to stay in business, as it grows, it moves up to the heart center. It's what can I do for my employees and for everybody else. Ultimately, at the highest level, the business exists to serve society in a big way. And that's, where John Mackey used to come to our yoga classes in Austin. And so I grew up with them, and I was part of his nonprofit Flow, which was all about conscious capitalism, that the philosophy and the mission was that you can bring happiness, prosperity, security, all of these things to people through conscious capitalism and doing it that way. So that's kind of what's driven me, and that's what we would be looking for, people that would want to aspire to those values. And it helps because when you have that big picture and you're all connected at that level, then everything else is, you don't sweat the small shit. It's not, we can have an argument or whatever, but it's not, we're not walking out the door. We used to have this saying is that, when you come in, park your shit at the door. You can pick it up on the way out. But, inside we play the game that we all committed to by the rules that we set up. And over time, it's just, for me, it's just a lot of fun. And that's with people is the main thing. It's just a connection with people, doing something that you think is serving other people and that you enjoy doing together. The emphasis is together. Absolutely. And it's not about one person, I just look at myself in the position, that's what I was given to do, and then you should figure out your talents and give back, and maximize those.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, but truly such a wonderful conversation. I'm very excited to share your thoughts with our audience. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. And talk about inspiration.
Yeah.
That's what I feel, that it's about being bigger than yourself and being very intentional, not just on where you're going, but how that affects.
Yeah, no, if I can, just one last thing is that I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce in Eugene, and then I became the chair in 2007. And with the way I looked at business in the world, but this is not kind of normal in a Chamber of Commerce kind of thing, but I go, so they always had in January, they install the new chair, they have the celebration of business, and there's about 1,000 people at dinner, and you give your speech, right? And I go, what am I going to say? Well, I'm just going to put it out there as I see it. But we got a lot of positive response, and we did some long-term planning with a chamber that they hadn't done for like 15 years. But I said, I think our litmus should be of saying if we're of value is not that the business community values us, but the whole community of the city values us as being a positive contributor to what matters to everybody.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for your time and insights. Truly, truly appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today at Hiring for Good. If you were inspired by our conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to learn more about our executive search services, check us out at www.hiringforgood.net or our company website, Acumen Executive Search.
Thanks so much, and don't forget to join us next time for another in-depth conversation about transformational leadership. Until then, have fun.